Stay tuned for Butler on Business, coming up next on the Liberty Express.
Jason, introduce Jeffrey Tucker to the listeners.
Alan, it is my privilege to introduce Jeffrey Tucker. He's the publisher and executive editor of Laissez-Faire Books. He's the author of Bourbon for Breakfast and the other book, It's a Jetsons World. He also serves as an editorial consultant to Mises.org. Jeffrey, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's really fantastic to be here. Sorry, I'm just a little bit tardy. Hope that wasn't a problem.
No problem at all.
No, in fact, Jeffrey, we've quoted you a number of times with attribution, so it's an honor to have you on the show.
I will tell you.
I've used a lot of your notes for content, I have to confess.
That's fine. If you don't attribute me, that's also okay.
No, we attribute you.
Okay, that's fine.
But now, why do you feel it's so important to promote the message of sound economics and individual liberty?
Oh, for goodness sake. Well, I don't know what the deal is with economics, but it seems like something has to be learned by every single generation new. Again, it's a little bit frustrating because you could read great sound economic thinking going back hundreds and hundreds of years, but somehow it never becomes sticky in the mind of the public. It's like, it has to be sort of constantly put in people's faces, or else people just make mistakes and fallacies all the time.
Well, Jeffrey, I'm sorry, Jason, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that for my own personal intellectual journey, Jeffrey and the Mises Institute have played a tremendous role several years ago when I really got into trying to learn the basics of economics. It's something that was very different, at least sound economics, very different from what we learned in high school and even college. There are so many free resources out there, so many good resources out there, from lectures, presentations, articles that you in particular have written, Jeffrey, that it's just a matter of people going out and discovering what's there.
Yeah, and it's a matter of getting interested in the topic. Lots of times people talk about economics, but don't know they're talking about economics. You hear this all the time from, for example, the pulpit on Sunday. The preacher will be going on about some important economic topic without understanding that he's talking about economics and doesn't bother actually looking into it. You see this all the time in every aspect of life. People are talking about economics without knowing that they're talking about economics. I mean, after all, economic logic, it becomes relevant to the whole of our material lives. I mean, it becomes important to think about, and so far as the subject we're discussing involves the reality of scarcity and the production and allocation of goods and services. So that's a lot of parts of our life that involve economics. It behooves everybody to get involved in learning it. And one of the reasons that a guy like Mises, or I'm thinking about maybe Bastiat or Hayek was this way too, any great economist in history has worked hard to speak to the general public as well as just speaking to, the specialists. But for some reason, we continue to think of economics as being some kind of rarefied specialty that belongs only to a certain, high priesthood, that they're supposed to tell us how to think about it. This is a real mistake because economics is actually accessible to every citizen.
Well, it seems like if there is a silver lining to the recent financial crisis, it might be that more and more people now are looking for answers and getting interested in this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that it's so easy to make mistakes, make fallacies. And, you watch a typical press conference these days and you just kind of hear, he sounds very articulate and it sounds like he knows what he's doing and he's got his hands on all the levers of power and you want to kind of believe what he's saying. But then he makes just obviously false statements all the time. So it kind of makes you wonder whether or not he needs to kind of revisit some fundamentals. For example, a reality that you can't have an investment without savings. And you can't have savings without deferring consumption. Often seems to think it's like the reverse. First you consume, and then that somehow spurs investment. And, it's like he's got the whole world upside down. And it's not working. And another thing he seems to believe is that you can generate prosperity out of the printing press. And that if you just keep running that press hard enough, long enough, then eventually everybody's going to catch on and everything's going to recover. And another thing he seems to think is that there's some strange trade-off between inflation and unemployment. So if unemployment's high, you need to increase inflation, and then when unemployment goes down, and then you can reduce inflation. But there's no evidence that such a trade-off really exists in any long-term sense. And anyway, he's walking around with all these kind of fallacies in his head, and which shouldn't be so bad. I mean, if that were the clerk at the local convenience store that had a lot of fallacies about economics in his head, okay, well, maybe his store won't do well, but that's not a problem for the rest of us. But sort of running the globe in a way, so it becomes a little bit scary.
I had a conversation with G. Edward Griffin not too long ago, the author of the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and I asked him when we were talking about Ben Bernanke, was Ben Bernanke just misinformed or deliberately misleading? And Edward's reply was, he is the greatest misformer of them all, intentionally misinforming people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably a combination because his training comes out of that sort of Keynesian style framework. It just so happens that framework also merges very well with the interests of a central banker who wants a lot of power and wants to channel money toward his favorite interest groups and the large bond dealers and big banks. So, theory and practice seem to work together for these guys.
Jeffrey, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one of the things about the Austrian economics, which, I mean, you can call it Austrian economics or just call it good economics, whatever you want to call it, is that in order for it to really become instantiated in our current reality, we're going to have to come to terms with things we probably don't want to face. One is that the government is a net destroyer of wealth, and that it should be radically cut back and reduced to as far as possible. Well, there's a lot of people that don't want that to happen. So as a result, there's a lot of people who don't want to think seriously about economic topics because it impinges on their interests,
Tell us about Laissez-Faire Books, if you don't mind.
Well, it's an interesting institution. It was founded in 1972, in the very early years of nobody really even heard of libertarianism, and a little tiny bookstore opened up that was pushing out books on freedom that a lot of people hadn't heard about, a lot of older titles that people hadn't heard about before, and a lot of newer books that were coming out by a new kind of class of intellectuals that were beginning to realize that socialism didn't work, that the Keynesian-style interventionism doesn't work, that the the Vietnam War wasn't working, that there's a moral problem with the draft. The government was getting too big in every area of life, not just one, but in every area of life. And it pushed out books all through the decades and was a major kind of font of publication and distribution of this new tradition of thought, which, if you look at it today, is so pervasive as compared to what it was, 40 some odd years ago. So we just had our 40th anniversary. The bookstore never really made the leap into the digital age in a very sort of substantial way. They had a website, but it had been in sort of decline for some years. Last year, it was taken over by a for-profit company called Agora Financial, which is a very nice global provider of business information and investment analysis, and took over the bookstore, and then hired me to kind of run it and bring it into the digital age. And we have wonderfully exciting plans going forward. So it's really thrilling for me to be on the kind of ground floor of what I think is going to be a really, really great enterprise going forward. I have more publications that I can even juggle. Every day I get another manuscript submitted to me, and it's great. It's all great material. So we're going to be publishing in physical form, ebook form, audio, PDF. I'm a big believer in just giving away free books and inviting also people to buy them. We have other plans that are brewing, very innovative stuff that nobody's tried ever before in the world of literature. Truly, we're doing things that have been done, that are going to be done for the first time. I'm really excited about that.
Well, I, for one, am also very excited to watch the growth here. The website is lfb.org for anybody interested in checking it out. And I'd like to point out it's much more than a bookstore, what you guys are doing. It's almost like it's a gathering place for folks that are interested in these kind of topics.
Yeah, and it's going to become more so, really. Watch the space for within the next month. We're going to be releasing all kind of new innovative strategies for for developing online literary societies and things like that. So it's all good fun. And what makes it fun? The enterprise is fun. I love business. Business commerce is the heartbeat of civilization. It's the true data of history. It's where ideas become real and affect people's daily lives. Commerce, to me, is the most underrated, underappreciated force in the universe. Very beautiful to watch. Human association, creativity. Commerce is beautiful. I believe that. So I like that aspect of it. But unite commerce with a great cause, namely the cause of human liberty, and you have a beautiful mix. So I'm really honored and thrilled to be working in this world, trying to unite the cause of human liberty with the beautiful data of history embedded in the commercial institution. So those things together. I'm just a very lucky man. What can I say?
Well, it certainly sounds like an exciting project, and I'm definitely looking forward to watching it grow. Again, Laissez-Faire Books, LFB.org. Jeffrey Tucker, it's been a pleasure. We look forward to having you back on again.
Thank you very much for having me.